aircraft carrier. He was
Yeah.
on that, he was on that until the Battle of the Coral Sea, and he spent after the battle he spent 6 hours floating in the water waiting for somebody to pick him up. When the Lexington went down or the abandoned ship,
Hmm.
and he said, "I never want dive bombers coming at me again." So he
Yeah.
volunteered. He volunteered to go into submarines, and he spent the next 30 years of his Navy career in submarines. So
Well, that's one way to do it.
yeah, and both my boys, both of them enlisted in the military. My oldest son went in the Marines. My youngest son went in the Army. Uh, did their 2 years. Then went ahead, went to college, back to college, got their commissions, came in the Army. Both of them. The younger son went infantry and commanded two companies in Iraq in the infantry. The older son, he went armor, commanded a tank company in Iraq,
Mhm.
and then he commanded a battalion in Afghanistan. And the other son, I don't know what he does. He just went into some classified program in the Pentagon and has done that for God knows how long. He's retired now, and the other son is at NATO headquarters in Brussels, and he's fixing to retire in another year or two.
So three sons total.
Two sons.
Two sons. Oh wait, okay. So one went. So went
One,
Marines, Army. Then they got their commissions, both Army, and then out of that, one went Pentagon.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the other went to NATO headquarters.
Okay. I'm just popping over here to our social media, making sure we are live on Facebook and YouTube, but we're not quite ready for the live show. We got a couple more minutes until everyone pops into the room.
Okay.
Let's see here. And I'll be sort of monitoring those social media outlets during the program so that if any questions come in through viewers on those areas, then I'll bring them into the live program as well.
Okay.
How is Florida? How's the weather like down there?
It's starting to turn into summer.
Yeah.
Kind of warm in the midday. It's in the high 70s, low 80s midday. Nights are nice and cool.
Mm-hmm.
I usually leave about 7 o'clock and go for a 2 hour walk and at 7 o'clock at night. So
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty nice. We're hoping to get the rainy season starting soon, so we can start getting some rain out there to water our lawns.
Yeah, it's been freezing here still. We're still trying to get to spring. Pittsburgh is always late to the party.
Where are you at, Sean? You're in
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh? Yep. You guys had just had a snowstorm up there, didn't you?
Yeah, we got hit a couple days ago. Not bad, just mainly a dusting. But yeah, it was like we thought we were done with it. We had our last snow hit a couple weeks back, and here came around and hit us again. So March, you just never know what you're going to get. We had a couple days where I was in shorts outside walking the dog, and then it was like, nope, snow's coming back. So all right, put back on the winter gear and trudge through it for another couple days.
How popular are electric cars up there?
Pretty popular.
Really?
I mean, I don't have a frame of reference in the sense of like if I was in New York, how many do they have a comparison? But where I'm at in Pittsburgh, which is south of the city, I see a fair number.
I would think, after that big snowstorm was in Virginia a couple of months ago, where cars were snowed in on I-95 for 24 hours. I'm thinking,
Yeah,
if you had an electric car, how the hell do you keep the heater going?
no clue. And did you?
Or if you run the battery down, how do you get it recharged when you're sitting there and everybody else is getting filled back up with gasoline enough to get to a gas station? What do you do?
You got to figure that the manufacturers like knew something like that might happen, and you'd hope that they'd be like, okay, you got to find a 5-hour charge on the car, and like, maybe you turn off the lights and that'll help you run the heater for a little longer. But I completely agree with you. Like I would be sweating if I was in that situation.
That's right.
Yeah. And you heard about the big accident that happened right outside of Philly.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the video of that. It was terrifying.
I almost was in an accident like that once, but thank God my oldest son, he was just a baby, loaded up his diaper, and it was so bad in the car, that we had to get off the interstate to get that diaper changed.
Yeah.
When we got back on the interstate, 30 minutes later, there was about a 60-car pileup right where we were going to be. If he hadn't have dumped in his diapers, we'd have been right in the middle of that accident.
Jeez. It's 9 a.m. I'm going to let everybody in, but oh my God, let's talk about fate. Goodness, I've been muted. I'm so sorry. I've been talking and oh boy, it's one of those mornings. It's gonna be, I'm guessing.
You looked good, but you looked good, Sean. You
Thanks.
still look good. Yeah, your mouth works. Everything works. I know
boy.
Larry and I were just kind of staring at each other for a while. But anyway, good morning. And I'll be quiet.
I hadn't even seen it because I'm popping around trying to pull up all the sponsors and try to pull up the PowerPoint. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to talk and I'll pull this other stuff up. And of course, I pop back over and I'm muted. That's
Just rewind, Sean. Just rewind.
Give me about another minute here. Sean Hall, Director of Programming, Veterans Breakfast Club Coffee Hour for March 30th. There's the short version. Larry, you were at the program last night, which is what I was actually talking about. And it was great to see everybody face to face last night. Larry, what did you think of the program last night over at Soldiers and Sailors?
It was really an emotional evening because to have the speaker that we had, she was just amazing. We've heard her story on here before, and her art and her story was in the article, but to actually meet her, all five, as she always puts it, all 5 foot 2 inches of her, having being picked up from a ditch outside of Quang Tri to becoming a graduate of the Naval Academy and now president of a nonprofit that supports veterans. It was just, I think there wasn't a dry eye in the place, and it was amazing. Just about every veteran had to come up and talk to her and shake her hand. It was that Todd, I guess just Todd put out the invitation and she jumped at it. So it shows the power of VBC.
Yeah, she really did. Kim's great. I've heard her story several times already. And every single time you can't believe it. You can't believe the story that she has and her willpower. And even going through and living, growing up in Wisconsin and her dad getting struck by lightning, it's just so tragic. But then going in the Naval Academy and the success that she's had, and boy, it's so inspirational. Dawn, you have your hand up.
Yes. Good morning, Sean, and good morning, men and ladies. Again, I attended virtually, and I can't tell you how much I enjoyed watching Kim speak to us and the emotions that were coming through, even on the screen. And I just want to thank you and Todd and the people at the Soldiers and Sailors for putting out an outstanding program on an important day for us Vietnam veterans.
Well, of course, and welcome home to everyone. And joining us this morning is going to be Matt Jackson. He's the author of the Undaunted Valor series. We're going to get into his story and the series. Matt, I'm so excited to have you a part of the program today. Before we get to you, I'm going to take a shout out to our sponsors here. Knowing now that I'm unmuted and I can actually speak to the sponsors, First does D&D Auto Salvage. They actually helped sponsor last night as well. They've been doing really wonderful work, and we just really appreciate all the support that they've given us over here at VBC. But they're an auto salvage company. Began as a small hauling and used parts operation in Pittsburgh, and they began in the late 70s. And now they're a full service metal recycling company. They got 2 locations in Lawrenceville, and I always mispronounce it. This is a Pittsburgh thing. I don't know any of the boroughs, and I think I mentioned to Ryan All last night, you could tell me 5 boroughs in Pittsburgh, and I might know where 2 of them are, even though I grew up here. But Tarentum or Tarentum, I think it's Tarentum, but we always say North for sales anyway. So, it's a Pittsburgh thing. These are state-of-the-art scrap yards with deep roots in the community and a strong commitment to the service of their customers. You can contact them for quotes and availability at dandautosalvage.com. It's dandautosalvage.com. We really appreciate the support of D&D. I see, Brad, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm so happy to see Annette in the audience. I watched the show the other night, and her story along with Ruth was just so riveting, and so many favorable comments, so moving, and the poetry really added to the stories. It was such a great show, and I couldn't resist saying hello to Annette this morning, and thank you for joining us. And Sean, do you know why they build houses in Tarentum?
No, but that's a beginning of a joke, but I'll play into. No, I don't.
Tarentum.
Well played, Brad. That's a perfect dad joke for the morning.
I'll be quiet from now on. That's.
Oh, thank you so much, Brad, for the shout out. That really means a lot. And my husband was deeply touched last night. We attended virtually, and to have his name read online just meant so much. So thank you.
Yes. Go Steelers.
Yeah. Annette, I had a couple people come up to me last night and mention the same, that they were so moved and touched by the stories on Monday night, for coming on to tell your stories, and for coming on this morning, rejoining us. And one more sponsor here. You see, you never know. Whenever you lose Ellie was the glue that held it all together. I really tell you, she'd be on the back end just running all this stuff. And now Todd and I do it on our own, and we're bouncing around like, a ping pong ball. Tobacco-free Adagio Health has been sponsoring us for a while now too. They're really wonderful. I'm going to be teaming up with them to run an episode of the podcast on. Nemchik has graciously accepted an invitation to come on and talk, as they are about quitting smoking, and Don was a smoker. He was able to quit back in the late 90s. So he wants to come on and talk about that. So I'm excited to invite them on, but they are dedicated to reducing and preventing tobacco use and to getting the word out about the hazards of smoking and secondhand smoke. They're all about health. So they want people to quit. You can do that by contacting them on their quit line, 1-800-QUIT-NOW. They also like to educate people, children especially, about tobacco use, from cigarettes and cigars, pipes, chew, snuff, other nicotine products like vaping. And finally, tobacco-free Adagio Health. They advocate for public and private policies that ensure healthy places to live, work, and play. You can learn all about them on their website, tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org. So thank you to our sponsors. As always, it's always a pleasure to work with them. And I'm also going to pump here our magazine. If you are not receiving our magazine, the BBC magazine, boy, you're missing out. Kim Mitchell, who joined us last night, she was the main story of our recent magazine in the spring issue. This is a free magazine, 32 pages. We're thinking about expanding it. Comes out quarterly. All you have to do is either email us your address or get in touch with Todd or myself. Let us know. We'll make sure to put you on the list to get this magazine. It's really well done and a good read top to bottom. I'm sure anybody here would probably, I know, Brad, you also have the magazine behind you there in your magazine rack, but everybody mentions, hey, we read it front to back, and it's just, it'll hold your attention. So not unlike some of those other magazines, whatever ones they are. I don't know which ones, but Larry.
Could I take an opportunity also to thank Annette for the Monday night? That was riveting, and thank you very much. I I don't want to take up the time. And as was I was doing it virtually virtually last night for the show last night. Both outstanding, just as Dawn was saying it virtually. And then I just want to say thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. It was our pleasure.
Outstanding. And I don't want to take up any more time, but I just had to say thank you. I listened to both of those, and I'll try to be quiet now. Thank you very much, Todd. Sean, sorry.
That's all right. That's a little bit of revenge for the rib at the beginning.
There you go.
Thank you, Larry. Yes. And also here on the Facebook, Beth Feather, you asked, was Kim's story of Monday night recorded? Kim Mitchell's story was last night, which was Tuesday night. That was on Soldiers and Sailors social media account. You can check their social media on either Facebook or YouTube. Look up Soldiers and Sailors. I would assume that they've been recorded, and you can watch that presentation there on their social media account. But as for this morning, we are going to be talking with Matt Jackson. I want to welcome him here to the program. He is the author of the Undaunted Valor series. These are 3 books. He has 6 books in total, which we're going to get to overall. But Matt, thank you so much for joining the program.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I guess the main thing to get out of the way is that whenever we put this out on our e-blast, we said Matt Jackson, author, is coming on the program. Matt Jackson is the pen name of your real name, Gary Bridges. Is that correct?
That's correct. My attorney said, don't dare use your real name or you're going to have some strange people knocking on your front door. And he was right.
And the other is sort of the follow-up question to that is that you are Gary writing as Matt, but you're writing about a character named Dan Corey. How did you come about to that?
I want to make sure people weren't going to find me.
Going 3 deep eventually,
so we go 3 names, and that solved that problem.
Well, let's start at the beginning here. You came from a military family, is that right?
That's right. I am 3rd generation. Grandpa was on destroyers in World War I. My dad was he was on the Lexington until it went down in the Battle of the Coral Sea, and then he transferred to submarines and spent the next 30 years in submarines.
Well, you have to tell me this. You have to tell everyone the story that you told me of why he transferred to submarines.
Well, here he is, a young kid. He's aboard the Lexington. Battle of the Coral Sea's got dive bombers and torpedo planes coming at them. And Dad spent the next 6 hours in the water when they said abandoned ship. And he decided he didn't like airplanes attacking him. So he decided it would be safer going to submarines. And so Dad went into submarines, did 4 combat patrols on subs during World War II, and then just met the next 30 years of his Navy career in submarines.
Did he talk about his service? Like, I mean, the Battle of being on Lexington, that I'm sure that was traumatic enough, or being in the waters for 6 hours, that would be terrifying enough. But then to go into submarines, that's a niche right there. You know,
he loves submarines. He hated. The only time I ever saw my dad cry was when his dog was killed and when he was forced to retire from the Navy. And he just loved submarines. Now, he did spend a year out of the water in Vietnam. And I write about that in my first book because he used to come up and fly as my door gunner on a couple of occasions. And he screwed up one day and he got his butt royally chewed. Told my mother that was the worst ass chewing that he had ever had in his entire career. But
was this in front of you? Did you witness that?
Did I what?
Did you witness the chewing?
Yeah, I gave the chewing. He was my door gunner and he screwed up. And I was the aircraft commander and I let him know under no certain terms that what he did would never happen again on my aircraft, or he would never come back again.
Wow.
So he took it like he should. And we got along good.
You know, I've only read so many times about fathers and sons actually serving together, and it happened a lot in the post 9/11 era just because of how long the wars were. But that, I mean, me to start off, just like, how did that feel to have to chew him out, and you had to do that? Like, you had to talk to your dad in that way. I guess this is the job.
Let me tell you what happened, and you'll understand.
Yeah.
Dad was flying as my door gunner, and he was a lieutenant commander in the Navy. I was a warrant officer, W-2, and we were going in on a combat assault. Had troops on board. We were a flight of 6 aircraft. I forget where my position was. I was either 2 or 3, somewhere in there. And at 2 minutes out, the artillery stopped. The Cobras rolled hot. And at 2 minutes out, we gave the door gunners the word, open fire. And I heard my crew chief's gun firing, but I didn't hear the gun on Dad's side firing. And we got green tracers coming up at us.
Mm-hmm.
So we're taking fire going in. So I keyed the mic again. I said, Dad, open fire. Nothing. So I'm thinking, he's been hit.
Mm-hmm.
And I turned around and looked back over my shoulder, and there he was, in his monkey harness, standing on the skids, leaning out, taking pictures. And
Oh boy.
I chewed into him because I explained to him that, Dad, we've only got 12 machine guns in this lift, and you not shooting, that doesn't help the lift at all.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was a little bit more vocal about it then, but he got back inside and got back on the gun. And then when we got on the ground back at the airfield, we continued the conversation, one-sided. And he just admitted he screwed up. So
that's something a millennial would do, I think. It's a very, like, somebody's hanging out using his phone and snapping pictures while he was a bit ahead of his time, maybe, actually.
maybe so, but it was good.
So he was Navy, you went Army. What did he think about that?
He's the one that encouraged me. I graduated from high school in Japan, came back to the States, had 2 worthless years in college.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, they were worthless. And finally I decided that, I've got to go do something else. Well, I'd spent 1 summer working on a logging crew in Oregon. Wasn't about to go back and do that again. Mm-hmm. And I'd spent 1 summer as a merchant sailor on an oil tanker from Okinawa to Saudi Arabia. I was going to quit college and go back and do that. And we had a conversation, and he said, look, if you go back to the Merchant Mariners, you'll never go back to college. And he was right. I really enjoyed being a merchant sailor. And I've done it. So I said, all right, I'm going to join the Navy. He said, He said, look, you've already got your private pilot's license. Why don't you go in the Army and be a helicopter pilot? Mm-hmm. Sign me up. I'll go do that. And so that's what I did. I went and joined the Army the next day and signed up for the Army Warrant Officer Flight School program. High School to Flight School, it was called. And
you pretty much had a life before you lived a life before you even joined the Army, because I've talked with many people about being a merchant mariner, and that summer that you spent doing that, what did you learn while being on ship?
I thought it was wonderful. Mm-hmm. The only thing I didn't like about being on board ship on an oil tanker, T2 oil tanker, was once we dropped the oil off in Okinawa and started back to Saudi Arabia, we had to go down in those oil tanks and muck out the sand residue that was in the bottom. So you go down there, and 15 minutes later, 1, you're throwing up because you're in rough seas, and 2, just the intense smell of the oil, plus you're covered in oil. So that was the only bad thing about it, but that lasted 3 or 4 days, and because you did it outside your watch, you got paid pretty good for it. So
those were long days. You were what, 4 on, 8 off?
Yeah, 4 on, 8 off, and and then at night you didn't muck. So the 4 off during the day is when you'd be down below mucking. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I really did. Saved a lot of money. Met some great guys, and the funny thing is we went into Ras Tanura, Saudi Arabia, on the first trip. Second trip we went into Bahrain, and 30 years later, I'm commanding an infantry battalion in Desert Storm outside of Ras Tanura, and I tried to go all the way down to the dock so I could say, yes, I've been around the world, and they wouldn't let me go down to the end of the dock. So I am 300 yards short of going around the world.
Tell me you completed that. Did you complete that objective in life?
No,
never did.
Never did. I'm still 300 yards short of going around the world. And trust me, I am not going back just to complete that task. I left nothing in Saudi Arabia that I want to go back and pick up.
Yeah, probably not. And actually, we have some more interesting stories with you about Saudi Arabia later on when we talk about your next series of books. But let's get into 68. 68, you enlist, and that's sort of, Vietnam's going on at that point. So you had no hesitation about going in to be a helicopter pilot. Was there enough stories coming out of Vietnam that you knew the dangers of becoming a helicopter pilot?
Yeah, but it's other guys are going, so I should go too. And I knew if I didn't go in the Merchant Mariners and I quit college, I was going to get drafted. So, and I wanted to go in the military. So it was not a big decision. They trained us well in flight school. We all left flight school knowing that there was a chance that would get shot down, and all of us, I think, did get shot down at some point in time, multiple times. But you went with the attitude of, hey, this is the job I'm going to do, and let's go do it.
A quick question from Dawn, who's a Navy vet. Do the Merchant Mariners have shellback ceremonies when crossing the equator?
Not really. We never did get across the equator. So the furthest south we went was Singapore and this around through the Arabian Sea around Ceylon. It's called Ceylon at that time. So we never did get south of the equator, and I never heard of anybody talking about shellback ceremonies for going south of the equator.
And I want to bring up the Undaunted Valor series before too long, because they so much relate to your service in Vietnam. So at what point do the books start with your experiences?
Book 1.
Yeah. And that's the main one up on top. The subtitle of that one is
An Assault Helicopter Unit in Vietnam.
Okay. So that's book 1, volume 1. And does that start with your basic training and into Vietnam?
Chapter 1 is basic training. Chapter 2 is primary flight school. Chapter 3 is advanced flight school. And I think it's chapter 5, I wind up in Vietnam. Actually, book 1 started out as an autobiography. And I thought, well, nobody's going to read Grandpa's autobiography. So I thought, if I'm going to write this, I might as well write it as a historical novel. And that's really the approach I took in writing book 1. It's totally my story. It's totally what happened to me in Vietnam. And all the events in the book are the events that happened. All the characters in the book are guys I served with. And I used their real names, except for in the case of 4 people. My wife is in the book for 1 chapter. And she said if I used her real name, she would divorce me. So Mary Simmons in book 1 is really my wife, but that's not her name. There was 2 lieutenants that we had that I really didn't want to honor them by using their real names. So if somebody reads the book, they'll recognize real quick who those 2 are. We had a warrant officer, great guy, but dumber than dirt. And so he's under a fictitious name as well. But all the other events and people, they are guys I served with. Some of them I'm still in contact with. Yeah, and it's all factual to that. Second book, same thing. Second book is Medal of Honor. Goes through to where our company commander was killed and got the Medal of Honor for his actions. And those names and events as well actually happened with the people that are indicated in the book.
And I don't want to, we don't want to obviously spoil the book, but we want to hear more of your story, which, if people want to get, a deeper understanding of your story, they can pick up the book and read through. But take us through book 1 in the sense of you get to Vietnam and you start in, being a helicopter pilot. What was it like sort of fitting in and then getting this experience?
Well, we arrived in Vietnam exactly 1 year to the day that I joined the Army. Mm-hmm. And I arrived and after a week, I went down to my unit. They got me down to the unit, and that was Alpha 227th. Chickaman was our call sign. And we were located at Lai Khe, Vietnam. It's in the 3 Corps area north of Saigon. And we were living in tents, big GP medium tents with wooden floors. I got to the unit, being a new guy. Yeah, there it is. Being a new guy, I was making all the typical dumb mistakes. And the old guys, thank God, were very understanding because they'd all made those same dumb mistakes. and we rotated. You never flew with the same aircraft commander. What you did is every day you flew with a different guy, and to learn from that different guy, the techniques that guys flew with. And over about a 3-month period, I think I was in the end of my 3rd month when I made aircraft commander. And the rule of the unit was you had to fly with every aircraft commander. Every aircraft commander had to vote that you become an aircraft commander. And you had to have 300 hours in country, or 400 hours in country flying. Well, in our unit, you got that 400 hours within 3 months easily.
I was going to ask, how often were you flying each day?
You flew every day, and about the 8th or 9th day, you'd get a day off. Mm-hmm. You normally flew 10 hours a day, 10 to 12 hours a day. There was a couple of times we hit 22 hours in one 24-hour period.
How do you stay awake for that amount of time?
Later on, we got so short of pilots that the rule was one pilot could sleep while the other flew. And in my book, there's an incident there where we were flying back from a night mission. I had flown about 160 hours for the month already, within a 30-day period. And I told my co-pilot, I said, I'm gonna get some sleep. You got it. He goes, I got it, and I got it. And he was a lieutenant, and I was a W2. He said, I got it, Gary. And I said, okay. So I shut my eyes and immediately fell asleep. Then something said, wake up. And I opened my eyes. I didn't move. I just opened my eyes, and I just kind of looked out the side. My co-pilot was asleep. And the aircraft was flying along straight and level, very nice. But as he fell asleep, he released his grip on the cyclic, which let the cyclic move forward a little bit. And what woke me up was we started descending. And as you started descending, we were picking up airspeed, which picked up noise, which picked up vibrations. And finally, he woke up and started looking. He looked over at me, and I went, "Did you have a good nap?" He says, "Oh," he says, "God, I'm sorry, Gary. I'm sorry." I said, "That's okay. I got it." And I took the aircraft, and I got on the radio, and I called our base, and I said, "Hey, base, Chicken Man 19er, we're inbound. I need medical, standing by." And we shut down. There was our unit doctor was standing there, and the operations officer was there, and our CO was there. And they said, "Who's wounded?" And I said, "Sir, I have flown 160 hours within the last 30 days. This crew has flown. We need a down day. I'm grounding us." And the commander, he turned to the doc. He said, "Doc," and doc says, "Look, I'm looking at these guys. I can tell you right now they need to be grounded. They're exhausted, as is every other pilot in this outfit." So CO said, and it was normal if you got grounded for flying, you had 3 days. I said, "Sir, I don't need 3 days. I need 24 hours. And
Tell me you slept for that 24.
I think I slept about 14, I think it was.
Oh,
But when I woke up, it was dead silence in the unit area. And I went out and I saw the unit clerk. And I said, "What's going on?" And he says, "Sir, the CO got on the phone last night. He called the battalion commander. The whole unit is grounded for 48 hours. And we've got a 48-hour stand down. Everybody's asleep, and nobody's to make any noise." So we stood down the whole unit for 48 hours for sleep. But it happened, if the rule was, when I first got there, if you had 120 hours within a 30-day period, then you were grounded. And then we started getting short on pilots. We had 21 aircraft. We got so short on pilots that we could not put up 19 aircraft with 2 pilots in it. We had a single pilot if we got any more requirements up. So, but it was a good unit. Good unit.
I was going to ask what the survival rate of being a helicopter pilot was.
It was pretty good. In fact, during this COVID thing, I used to tell people, look, I had a better survival rate in Vietnam as a helicopter pilot than what you people are complaining. No, I had less of a survival rate than what you people are complaining about COVID. I think it was a 90% survival rate as a helicopter pilot. And here in COVID, we're going, 97% survival. Well, yeah. Now, getting wounded, that was something different. A lot of pilots took a lot of hits, but survival rate for a helicopter pilot was I think it was about a 90% survival rate.
Now, I'm assuming that your first mission wasn't as hairy as that one, with both pilots sort of sleeping. But
No,
do you remember
it
your
wasn't.
first mission?
First mission was March 6th. I got through the unit probably around February, got in country February 8th, got to the unit about February 18th, somewhere in there, 5 days, 13th. And March 6th was my first hairy mission. And we picked up the Nighthawk bird had gone out and came back in with about 30 holes in the tail boom. And so they launched an operation we picked up troops at Benoit and went about 15, 20 kilometers north of Benoit, inserted them in a landing zone, and it took about 8 hours of flying on that landing zone. And we never did get all the troops in because there was just so much contact with the enemy. They were dug in all around the landing zone. And
this was your first mission?
My first mission.
Did you at any point during that go, oh boy, this is going to be a long tour?
Yeah. I didn't have to do that too long because my aircraft got shot out of the LZ. We made it back to Benoit, but that aircraft didn't fly again. Mm. And so I was sitting there on the ground and listening to the guys of what was going on. They had Cobra gunships go in and do pedal turns because it got so intense. We had one pilot go in. He was taking so many hits in the nose that he picked the aircraft up and turned his tail to where he was taking hits. They had 250 cals and a 30 cal machine gun dug in.
He was flying backwards?
Yeah, well, he landed, mm-hmm. and he was getting troops. He was trying to get the wounded on, but he was taking hits in his nose. So he picked it to hover and turned around and set back down so that the hits were coming in the back of the aircraft as opposed to the cockpit. And then he flew out of there. But mm-hmm. But it was just, and then in 68 at Tet, the NVA and the VC, especially the VC, got torn up pretty bad. And so 69, it wasn't as intense on helicopters as it had been the previous year, mm-hmm. because they were the NVA, the 5th NVA division was moving down from Laos, coming into Vietnam. In 70, the intensity started picking back up again, and then into 71, it really got bad, and 72 as well. But 72, a lot of the helicopters were coming out of Vietnam. The last unit out was the 199th Infantry Brigade, and they came out in April of 72, and that was the last U.S. ground unit to come out. The 1st Cav had a brigade that was only a brigade left in 72 down in the 3 Corps area, and they were coming out as well.
At what point, and this is sort of flashing forward and back between writing the book and remembering this 18 months in Vietnam, but at what point did you decide that you wanted to write about all of your experiences? Because you obviously, flying that much and flying that many missions, you had a lot of things to focus on in the book. How do you even select which ones to focus on?
When I got I retired fully in 2015 and moved to Florida. And sitting around with nothing to do, I got hit with PTSD, which I had never believed in. And it was kind of traumatic the way it hit me, but I finally had to go see somebody. And the doc at the VA, who I'm absolutely in love with the VA down here in Tampa, he said, I want you to write this stuff down. And so I started to write it down, and that's how I got to the point of starting to write a biography. And then I thought, well, hell, I'm going to make this a historical novel. Well, I took that first book, and I went to my first reunion. And the guys at the reunion were great. And these were guys that I hadn't seen in years. And they said, well, I read your book, but what about this? You didn't talk about this in that book. What about this? What about this? Well, that led to the second book. And I got the second book out, Medal of Honor. And then it was you didn't talk about Lam Son 719 at all. What about that? And that led to the third book. And now I'm into writing 3 more books about the Easter Offensive of 72 because guys are going, hey, you need to write about this or write about that. So that's how it led to that. writing about these things. As far as the first book goes and the events in it, guys asked me, did you keep notes while you're there? No. This stuff just, as I sat down, started writing, it started all flowing back. And so I had no problem picking out events that occurred. And one of those events was the main cause of the PTSD. And by writing the book, we got down to with the doc and we were able to pretty much get that back under control. So,
can you give us a sort of an overview of that? If you don't want to go into it, that's fine. But just what part in the book really sort of maybe helped you deal with that?
We had a mission to fly, and I was high time pilot for the unit. Mm-hmm. And the policy in the unit was high time would go out, inspect their aircraft, get it ready to go. And if another bird couldn't crank, then you took that mission. If everybody took off, then you got to have the day off. So the night before, my aircraft had a new rotor head put on it. And the maintenance officer, he took the aircraft out, he flew it, had no problems. And in the morning, I went out, did my pre-flight, and I always did the rotor head. I'd let the co-pilot do around the down below, but I always two things I always check. I always check the rotor head, and I always check the engine. So we're sitting there, and I started the aircraft up, and we're sitting there, and I get a call from ops saying, "Hey, so-and-so couldn't crank. You're going to take that mission." I said, "Roger, got it." And we started to pick up. Well, the aircraft commander and the co-pilot from that other aircraft came running over, waved me down. Chip jumped up on my skids and said, "Hey, I'm low tide. I just got back from Hawaii. Let me take your aircraft." And I said, "Okay, you got it. I'm going to bed." So me and my co-pilot left the aircraft, got out. We watched our aircraft hover out with Chip and the other guy on it. They hovered out to the runway, took off. We walked into ops, and the ops sergeant, we called him Pappy, he was standing there crying. And he took one look at us, and his eyes just got like saucers. And he said, "Who's flying your aircraft?" And I said, "Yeah, Chip took it." "Why?" He said, "They got to the end of the runway and the rotor head fell off." The accident report found that the rotor head had not fallen off, it had failed. And what had happened when that rotor head was rebuilt, it was sent to Corpus Christi, not Texas, but the ship, Corpus Christi, that was a big maintenance ship off the coast. They had rebored the holes for the pitch change horn 1 millimeter bigger than what the bolts were. And when Chip went down to the end runway and pulled pitch, he popped those bolts out. They never did find the bolts, but they did find the rotor head. And when they examined it, they could see where those bolts had ripped out of the rotor head. And so he lost control of the rotor blades. He had no control over those blades. And that's the reason they crashed at the end of the runway. I still talk to the maintenance officer frequently. Great guy. He lives up in North Carolina. But him and I've talked about this several times, and that was the cause of the crash. But that's in the book. I wrote that in the book as well.
Talked with a lot of authors about, especially veteran authors, about writing and being able to deal with trauma, PTSD, through their writing. And you found that you were able to sort of work through that and honor them by writing them into the book and the story. Yes.
And it helped a lot, especially when the docs read the book. Both my doctors read the book, and they honed in right on that particular event. And that helped a great deal of bringing out a lot of things, other minor things that occurred as well that were bothering me. And like I said, I came back from Vietnam. I spent the next 25 years in the Army, never had a problem. Day after I retired from the Army, I started my own business or got involved in something that led to my own business. For the next 23 years, never had a problem. But when I fully retired and moved to Florida, I had nothing to do. And Doc, he tells me, he says, you are typical of what we see in Florida. You guys have vigorous, hard-charging lives, and then you retire and you come down here and you got nothing to do, and your mind starts opening up those drawers of things that happened in the past. And he says, you're typical of the guys we see down here.
Do they do the same sort of treatments with everybody? Not to get fully into that, but the idea that a lot of these guys are coming down there and they sort of do that. Do they talk to them all about, yeah, maybe if you write, maybe if you, talk with us, all that?
Yeah, there's 3 different treatment programs down here for PTSD, and I'm sure it's standard in the VA. You can do the group sessions, you can do an individual session, and they got another program that kind of sounded voodoo to me, so I didn't get too much involved with that.
Yeah.
But I took individual, and you all start out for 16 weeks in group, but you don't talk about your particular case. You talk about stuff in general, and then you make the choice between the 3. And I took individual and sat down with them. But one of the things they encourage was writing, and I will tell you, every veteran has got a story.
It's on our posters.
There you go. Every veteran has got a story. And I encourage guys to sit down for your own writing pleasure, your own pleasure, for your grandkids, for your great grandkids. Write your story. And if anybody has got questions about, okay, I want to write it and I want to get it published, feel free to contact me. I'll tell you how to do it. And it's easy. And it doesn't cost you a lot of money. You may try to find an agent. I sent out 172 letters to book agents. I got 8 responses back. They were all negative, but I really felt good that somebody actually read my letter. Now, I get a lot of calls from agents that saying, hey, we'd really like to sponsor your book. And my answer is, sorry about that. My book's already out there. And I'm satisfied with how well my books are doing. So, I'm not interested in dealing with the agent. Agents are going to cost you a fortune. You can put your books out there by yourself and not spend a fortune. Like, it costs $300 for somebody to design your cover, and I got a great guy that'll do that for you. The editor.
Sorry to interrupt. That's always a question that I always ask, is about the covers, because I always find it to be very interesting how the covers are selected and the design of that, because that's really what is the eye-catching thing, is like Undaunted Valor, like the look of the cover of that just pulls you in.
You got to have a good cover, and you got to have a good title. And the guy I've got does my covers. He lives in Serbia, and somebody told me or James Rosen told me, hey, get a hold of this guy. I got a hold of him. He said, what's your book about? I told him what the book was about. I said, it's about helicopters fighting in Vietnam. He said, got it. What's the title? I told him the title. It was 30 minutes later. He came back with the cover for book number 1. No changes.
Wow. Same
with book 2. Book 3, I had to make a slight change on that one because he showed a crash in the crashed aircraft. He showed an Air Force jet, and I said, no Air Force jets. This is about Army helicopters. And 2 minutes later, he was back with the helicopter on the cover. So He does a great job. Charges me $300 for a cover. In fact, to make a modification, he doesn't charge me anything. In fact, I have to tell him, look, you need to send me a bill for this modification. You don't do this for free.
Yeah.
The editor, she'll run you about $1,500 to $2,000, and she's in Michigan. The formatter is in Tasmania. Charges $140 to format the books.
You have more areas working on this than the F-35.
Say again. And let's see my map maker. He's in Washington D.C. and he charges maybe $100 for a map, but you can do it all yourself really cheap.
Yeah. Well, jumping back into book 1, you know, a lot of people say, okay, I'm going to read a novel. I'm going to read about a character. I want to have story arc. I want to have like, you know, beginning, middle, end. You know, how did you build that into just book one? And did you know you were going to write further while you were writing book one?
No, I did not know I was going to write further.
Mm-hmm.
The intent was just put book one out. And I didn't write further until I went to a reunion and somebody said, "What about this?"
Mm-hmm.
Book one, I just tracked my events. You went to basic training, then you went to flight school, then you got in Vietnam, and tracked that through. How I ended it, there was my best friend in flight school. When we shipped out to go over to Vietnam, him and I went and I stayed at his parents' house for a week. My dad was stationed in Morocco at the time. And so the family was there in Morocco. So I didn't have any family to come home to. I didn't have a wife. I didn't have a girlfriend at the time. So I went and stayed with this guy for a week. And then when I came home on leave, I went into Seattle. His dad picked me up. I stayed at their house for a couple of days before I went on leave and met my girlfriend at the time. I met a girl that became my girlfriend and became my wife for 51 years. And my time in Vietnam, when I was in my 18th month, that friend got killed. He was the division commander's personal pilot, and they were flying to Dalat from Phuc Vinh. They were flying to Cam Ranh Bay, but they went up through Dalat through the mountains, and they hit a mountaintop and were killed. And so I brought his body home. His parents asked that I be the escort on it. In fact, they went so far to say, if he brings our son's body home, will he have to go back to Vietnam? And they said it that I would not go back to Vietnam right away. So I brought his body home, and that's the last chapter of the book. So that was a clear ending to the first book right there.
You spent 18 months in Vietnam, but the three books, Undaunted Valor series, did they cover that full 18 months?
No.
Okay.
I was not involved in Lam Son 719 at all. And the second book, I was not there during the second book either. Now the book is written, all three books are written with Dan Corey, just so I had continuity between the three books, as they're all historical novels. But again, all the events are true, and all the people are people that actually flew in those events and that I've sat down and talked to.
Jim Puhala, your hand was raised, and my apologies for not seeing it. I'm in a different view for our social media, so I can't see everybody's face. But Jim, if you would like to unmute yourself if you have a question. I believe you were a helicopter pilot as well.
Yeah, in fact, I was in 227th a couple of years before Matt was there. And I think you and I interacted at the reunion that you mentioned earlier. And I saw your name on the morning report for the reunion beginning this weekend. Are you going to be there?
You bet. I'm leaving here Friday morning and heading up there. I'll get there to the Opryland Hotel on the 2nd.
Okay, well, I will see you there.
Good.
And, I know you got ideas for your second and third books at the reunion, and maybe I can encourage you to pick up some stories from the earlier years.
The prequel series.
Yeah, prequel.
The early years. Right now I'm involved and I need help. I'm writing 3 books on the Easter Offensive of '72. And I was going to do one book, and I've got so much material, I'm going to break it down into 3 books. It's going to be the Easter Offensive series, Quang Tri, Con Tum, and An Loc. But yeah, I'd be willing to do the early years. So be prepared to sit down and be interviewed.
Yeah, I don't know whether you heard the stories of the Fan Thiet Beach Boy escapades in '67, but that's where I was.
I heard something about it, but not a lot of detail. Everybody just kind of snickers and moves on.
Yeah, well, we can talk about that.
Good. Looking
Maybe not for the family-friendly programming of VBC, but sounds like that's an interesting story.
It's an interesting story.
Thank you, Jim. Don Nemchik asked in the chat, Matt, were you familiar with the Medal of Honor recipient Michael Novosol, the dust-off pilot of '69?
No, I was not, and now I'm not.
Don, if you're still here, if you're able to unmute yourself, do you have a synopsis of Michael's story?
Yes, I do. Just briefly, it was real brief. It was a father and son. They were both dust-off pilots. He was a chief warrant officer that was awarded the Medal of Honor. He rescued well over 5,000 GIs. His story is legendary. Just to keep it brief, I just suggest perhaps doing a Wikipedia search real quick. It comes up rapidly. And he's from my area here down in Western Pennsylvania. So he's legendary as a dust-off pilot, and his son. I believe they each rescued each other at one point in time. So it is very noteworthy. And I just suggest doing a quick Google search and reading his story. I think you'll find it interesting, Matt. And thank you for your insightful comments this morning. I'm going to look up your book, see if our library has it, or where I'm going to get a hold of it. If I have to purchase it on Amazon, so be it. But it's very interesting to me. I just enjoy what you're saying, and I'm going to let you go on. Thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you, sir.
So let's jump forward in time a bit. You also served in Desert Storm.
I did.
The time between Vietnam and then, what transpired in your career?
Well, I was flying in Vietnam. And in fact, we were operating up in Cambodia, and came back, and I'm sitting there we had a little club there at Lai K, and I was sitting there at the bar, and all day long, guys were calling me on the radio saying, "Hey, Matt," or "Hey, Gary, gonna hate to see you go." I thought, "What are you talking about?" "Oh, we heard you were leaving." And it had been mentioned, me leaving the unit and going to battalion. And I thought, don't tell me these guys have pulled me up to battalion. I was a W-2. And all day long, platoon leader came up, jumped on the skids. He said, "Hey, Gary, I hate to see you go, but send us some good missions." And I thought, damn, I am going to battalion now. So that night I got in the club and I was sitting at the bar and everybody's going, "Hey, Gary, hate to see you leaving us." Okay. And I'm sitting at the bar and having a beer, and the old man walked in. We had a great company commander. He came in, he says, "Hey, I got good news and I got bad news. So I'm going to give you the bad news first. Gary, come on up here." And I thought, here it comes. And he said, "You guys all know Gary. He's our unit IP. He's checked out a lot of you new guys and flown with all of us and done a great job. And we really hate to see you leave. But go forth and do great things, young man." Patted me on the back, and I went and sat down. I thought, son of a gun. And I'm sitting there, and he goes, "Now the good news. Got a new officer just signed in. He's got a lot of combat experience, got a lot of flying hours, and I want to introduce you all to First Lieutenant Gary Bridges." And I'm sitting at the bar, and I'm thinking, that poor son of a gun has got the same name as me. I turned around, everybody's looking at me. The old man goes, "Get up here." So I walk up, and I had this shocked look on my face. XO stands up, he says, "Attention, orders, promotion. W-2 Bridges to First Lieutenant Bridges, infantry." I thought, what the hell is this? Well, somebody put me in for a commission and didn't bother to tell me about it until it came through. So I went infantry, went back to the Infantry Officers Advanced Course, and then spent my first 15 years as an infantry officer switching between aviation assignments and infantry assignments. My infantry assignments were all light infantry. I went to airborne school, commanded an airborne unit up in Alaska as a company commander.
What is an airborne unit up in Alaska? I saw that in your bio, and it's like, what does an airborne unit in Alaska do?
Well, at that time, there was 3 infantry battalions in Alaska, and the Charlie Company, and each battalion was an airborne company. Mm-hmm. And our mission was to go in and jump in and secure an airfield. The primary mission is if a airliner had crashed in the Arctic, our mission was to jump in with survival gear on that airliner and try to rescue anybody that was alive. Mm-hmm. And we practiced that every month you had that mission. It rotated between the three companies. For 1 month, you'd be primary, so you were on a 2-hour notice if that happened, so nobody could get leave or go anywhere. But I loved Alaska. It was a great assignment up there. Now they have I think the entire brigade that's there now is out of the 25th Infantry Division, and I think the entire brigade is on jump status up there. Don't anybody quote me on that. I've kind of lost track of it. But yeah, I had the infantry assignments. I was a tactics instructor at the infantry school, taught airborne tactics. I went to the Command and General Staff College, graduated from that. They kept me around to be a tactics instructor there and taught Corps and Division tactics there at the Command and General Staff College. They sent me to Germany to be an exchange officer in the German Army for 2 years. And then they brought me back to Fort Campbell. And I was a brigade executive officer of 2nd Brigade. And then I got selected for battalion command. And I commanded 3rd Battalion, 327th Infantry. And that's when Desert Storm went down. That's when I was commanding that battalion.
And in your bio, you did mention that this was the highlight of your career, was commanding the Assault Infantry Battalion in Desert Shield.
It was.
Desert Storm.
Great assignment. And
why is that?
Well, I'd always wanted to command a battalion, but to command a battalion in combat, to me, that was the ultimate. And had a great executive officer, Major Bill David, retired as Brigadier General Bill David. Had a fantastic operations officer, Lloyd Miles, who retired as a Brigadier General as well. Good company commanders. Stay in contact with a lot of those guys even today. I'm having dinner tonight with a lieutenant at that time that was the first lieutenant to sign into the battalion after I took command. I'm having dinner with him and his family tonight. I've just stayed in contact with those guys, and they all made it great and worthwhile to command. The troops, I love the kids, and I call them the kids. And my radio operator, he lives just down the road from here, and we get together. And he's still as disrespectful today as he was back then, but Mike would always push the limit, but never cross the line. But it was just a great experience, great opportunity. Came back from that, I got promoted to full colonel. They sent me to the most worthless headquarters in the Army, FORSCOM. I spent 2 years there, and then they said, "Sir, we're going to bring you to the Pentagon." Nope, not going to the Pentagon. Had never served in the Pentagon. I was a muddy boots guy, and I would have been absolutely lost in the Pentagon. I didn't know the politics of it. I wanted nothing to do with the Pentagon. So I said, no, I'll take the option. Drop my retirement papers.
And your family, you have this long history, like we've talked about, of service, but your two boys, they also went into the service. Now, one went Army, but the other one went Marine.
Well,
so what?
Yeah. I had just taken command of the battalion, and we were getting ready to take the battalion to the Joint Readiness Training Center at Fort Chaffee, Arkansas. I don't know if you're familiar with that place, but to go there as a battalion, you are going into the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. And by God, you better win, or you just took a serious hit in your career. Mm-hmm. And I was determined. The first day I told the troops, I said, we're going to the Super Bowl of the Army, and we're going to win. So our division commander, General P., and General Shelton, who went on to be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, they were determined to help me win. And they put me through a field exercise that just exhausted me over 2 weeks. Learned a lot on that exercise. But I came home, and my wife is sitting there, and my oldest son, and my wife says, "Guess what your son did?" Your son did. I looked at him and I said, "What'd you do?" And he says, "Semper Fi." Well, you quit college, joined the Marine Corps? He says, "Dad, I only went in the Marine Corps Reserves. I'll drop out of school for 1 semester, and then it's 2 weeks, or it's 2 weeks in the summer." And he said, "I just want a break from school." I said, "All right, you got it." And he went off, and she looked at me and she said, "Well, what if we go to war?" I said, "Honey, don't worry about it. We haven't been to war since, Vietnam or Korea. They're not going to call the Marine Corps Reserves up for anything." Thanksgiving Day, 1990, I'm standing on the Iraqi border in Saudi Arabia, and the brigade commander comes up to me and says, you called home lately? I said, yes, sir. We got a phone booth behind every sand dune out here. No, I haven't called home. He says, I said, why? And he says, your son's unit's been activated. He's on his way over. Your wife is not happy. So,
well, what did that feel like to you? Was there a pit of your stomach, like, oh crap?
well, not really. I thought, okay. I really did not expect them to do much with the Marine Corps Reserve Unit, and they wound up being the Palace Guards for Marsland headquarters. So he really didn't get into action, and he came back, got a 2-year Army ROTC scholarship, and then became an officer in the Army, an armor officer. Our youngest son did a similar thing. Did 2 years in the Army. He enlisted, served right there at Fort Campbell in a scout platoon, and then he got out, went back to college, got his ROTC commission, and Chris went on to command 2 infantry companies in Iraq, and then went and did a bunch of stuff, and he served in the Pentagon for a while, and then he retired. Our oldest son, he is still on active duty. He's at NATO headquarters in Brussels, and the end of next month we're going over there to spend a couple of weeks with him and my grandkids.
What was it? You served with your dad, in the same helicopter, but what was it like in a way serving with your son as well?
It was great. I got a chance. The air war started in Iraq on, I think it was January 17th of 91. And 3 days before that, I got a chance to go down to where his unit was at and spend the day with him and have lunch with him and sit down and talk to him. And I was proud of him and both boys. Both boys couldn't make me prouder. I think we had, when Chris was in basic training, Jay was still in the Marine Corps Reserves and I had not retired yet. And so when Chris graduated from basic training at Fort Benning, Jay and I showed up at his graduation, me in my uniform and Jay in his Lance Corporal Marine Corps uniform because he was still in the Marine Reserves. And we got to spend the day with the 3 of us in uniform. My wife took a picture of the 3 amigos. So I'm very proud of my sons.
Was your dad still around for your tours in Desert Storm, Desert Shield?
No, my dad passed away in 1982. He passed away. He was 59 years old and had a series of heart attacks. So,
thinking about your books that cover Desert Storm, Desert Shield, is it the same character? Is it Corey?
Yes.
Dan Corey?
I carried Corey into the Desert Storm, Desert Shield books. The Desert Storm, Desert Shield books, there's 3 of those. Project 19 is the first one. Project 19 is the code name that Saddam Hussein used for the invasion of Kuwait. And me and a friend, James Rosen, we were sitting down and talking one day over coffee, and James has written, he must have 30 or 40 books out there. He's excellent books. But we were sitting there talking, and we said, what would have happened if Saddam had not stopped in Kuwait, but had continued the attack through Saudi Arabia into the UAE? Because his argument was with Kuwait and the UAE over funding. And so that's the approach we took. What if Saddam had attacked all the way into the UAE? How much different would Desert Storm and Desert Shield have been? And so that's the premise of the 3 books.
So mainly fictional ideas of where this goes. But what was, I can imagine you guys sitting down and really chatting this out about like who would have gotten involved, how would they, what was your ultimate conclusion to that?
It would have been a lot different. It'd been a lot harder to do. The hardest part would have been getting the forces over there, because if he'd overrun Saudi Arabia, where are we going to establish airfields? What ports are we going to use to get the troops onto that peninsula, into Arabia? We couldn't have used Iran. We were fighting with Iran, arguing with them. So the only places left open was Oman. And looking at the assets that Oman had to offer us, very limited. Egypt would have offered us airfields, but and Saddam almost made a good case for nobody helping us in Desert Storm. His argument to the UN was that Kuwait was really the 19th province of Iraq, and that when the Ottoman Empire broke up, Iraq should have assumed Kuwait as well. And it was only because of the British intervention and their desire to get the oil out of Kuwait that Kuwait was not part of Iraq. And this was his claim, that he was just going back and taking over a province that originally belonged to Iraq.
Well, that sounds really familiar.
So we went with the premise that the UN decided, okay, that's valid, and as long as the flow of oil is not disrupted, nobody came to help us except for the Brits and the Australians. The Egyptians, Mubarak was embarrassed when Iraq attacked Kuwait, because he was setting up a meeting between Saddam and the Emir of Kuwait to discuss the payments. Saddam felt that the money he borrowed from Kuwait to fight against Iran, that money was a gift, not a loan. And so Mubarak was setting up this meeting that occurred the day before Saddam attacked into Kuwait. And so Mubarak was very embarrassed when Saddam went and did that. So in the book, we were allowed to use the Egyptian airfields, and we did use the 2 Egyptian divisions that in fact did come to Desert Storm. And we portrayed them in the actual role that they played.
And you used a lot of your own personal experience in Operation Desert Storm to sort of help bring some bit of truth into this fictional sort of take on it.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, we used 18th Airborne Corps. We used 7th Corps. We used the Marines. And I interviewed a bunch of people on the logistics side for instance, General Smith was in charge of the eastern part of the United States for ports. Well, when they loaded the ship in Savannah, the ship couldn't leave the port because the ship was sitting in the mud, had been overloaded. But when they got to looking into why it was overloaded, it was because of the 24th Infantry Division, rather than just put the basic load on the vehicles, they put a double load of ammunition on all the vehicles. And that wasn't figured in the equation for the weight. So it got so much weight that this transport ship, the Ro-Ro ship, actually sunk there at the dock into the mud. They had to unload that ship. They had to unload all that loose ammunition out of the vehicles and then reload the ship. And that was one of the things that he had to deal with at the time. The reason they did it is because General McCafferty said, we're liable to have to fight coming out of the ship into the port. I need extra ammunition. And so I brought that out in the book, and that was one of the arguments. And that was some of the problems that people had. Rail cars. I know at the 101st, there was a big fight between the 101st and the 24th over getting flatbed trains to haul equipment to Jacksonville. And finally, the division commander at the 101st, General Peake, he had to get on the phone and call the president of CSX and say, hey, I've got to have some trains. Get me some trains. And so it was stuff like that was going on. At the time that it went down, I had a 1,200-man task force up at West Point. And I got a phone call. In fact, my XO and I, we were sitting there reading a Sunday paper. It was a Wall Street Journal, in fact, and we were reading about the possibility that there may be something between Iraq and Kuwait. And Bill and I sat there that Sunday and said, if we got the call, what would we have to do? We just war gamed it out between the two of us. Well, it was the next Friday that we got the call in the middle of the night. Get out of West Point as fast as you can and get back here. And since we'd already sat down and thought this thing out, we got on the phone, called the people there at West Point that we were working for, told them they'd already gotten the word as well that we were released to get back. And at 6 o'clock that next morning, we had 55 flatbed trucks coming in to pick up our equipment to start hauling it to Campbell. And at 3 o'clock that afternoon, a jet airliner showed up to haul my troops back to Fort Campbell. So, those kinds of things that were just pick up the telephone and call somebody. We don't have time to write a big war plan here. Let's do it. And so a lot of that was done in the early days of Desert Storm. And we bought that out in Project 19.
Having written a series of books that were based on your experience and sort of really much more like truth and then more of a fictional take, which one do you prefer writing?
The personal take, I guess, would be the one I prefer writing. James Rosen, James he's very technical oriented. I mean, he's always reading about what's on an F-15 and F-16, what's on a ship. And he is really good at coming up with stuff his fictional stuff coming off his head. Me, I want to write historical fiction. I want to sit down, interview people, find out events. How did those events attract? What kind of equipment was used in those events? And then I'll put conversation wrap around those events as to what probably was said or what would have been said under those circumstances. For me to sit down and write a Harry Potter type thing and dream something up, I'm no good at that. I want to write historical fiction. I want to, like these books for the Easter Offensive. I'm interviewing guys that were actually there on the ground that fought in those battles. And there, like I said, there wasn't many. It was advisors and some helicopter crews. And get their take and then put that together in a sequence and then put conversations. I'll come up with the conversations. But as far as dreaming up events, I'm no good at that.
I have a follow-up question about that, but there are two here. Bob McCormick asked, did you work with the 199 LIB in Vietnam?
Only on a very infrequent occasion. I was with the 1st Air Cavalry Division, and there was a couple of times that we went and were farmed out to do stuff for the 199th, but it was very infrequent.
We have a couple questions from Annette, our guest from Monday night, who is also an author. I want to get to those questions in just a minute, as they're more technical about publishing. But Jim Roberts, it was great seeing you yesterday as well, Jim. But Jim, you have your hand up.
Yes, I read your book, Gary, and so it was really interesting reading your book. You flew in my AO, which is Phuc Long Province along the border. The CAV was at Phuc Vinh when I got there. They had pulled out. And you weren't there when I was, but some of your guys flew some air mobiles for us. I was with the RFs. And so we would, from time to time, they would ask for lifts and we would get you guys to take us in. What was always interesting was that was during Vietnamization and everyone was disappearing. Is we would go in and the S3 at Province would tell us we're working on someone to get you out. And so sometimes we would go in with Americans and come out with Vietnamese, and sometimes we sit at the LZ wondering who's coming. We had no idea, but it was really interesting to read your books talking about the same AO I was in. I enjoyed it a lot. It was good.
Were you there when Anlock went down?
No, I was there in 71. I got there in April 71 and left in December 71. When I got there, there were about 250 MAT teams in the country. When I left, there were about 60. So they were pulling out very quickly. And so what was really crazy is we had Phuc Bin with a B in Phuc Long, which had 05s, 55s, 175s, and 8 inches. And we could call on those to support us because our RFs only had an 11-kilometer range on their 5 side. Those disappeared. And so we were frequently out in the boonies outside of radio contact and artillery because everything was just going home and we didn't know it. We could go out on one operation this week and I could call a 175. I could go out 2 weeks later and there was no 175 or support. And being a lieutenant, you know, I'm only briefed on what I need to know in front of me. I don't know the global picture. And so you get ready to go and you say, well, what's the frequency for the 175? They're gone. You know, and so it was always an interesting time there. But I really appreciated just reading the events about that area. It was very good. They're good reads.
Thank you.
Annette had asked, how do you self-publish? Amazon KDP or Ingram?
Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Amazon is really easy to publish with.
And Ned also mentioned it is so vital that these stories preserved and your fictionalized books are important work. Are you involved with the Military Writers Society of America?
The answer is no. I am on a couple of Facebook writing things like military authors, military thrillers, and I would really like to talk to her directly. I need her phone number. She's with the Soldiers and Sailors Museum, right?
Ned, you were with us Monday night. Soldiers and Sailors who we were with yesterday, but Ned, you're not involved with Soldiers and Sailors, correct?
No, I'm in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and I can put my email address in the conversation here in the chat.
Yeah.
And my phone number. I'll send that to you directly, Gary.
Good. Yeah, send it to me, and I can walk you through on how to publish and stuff like that. It's not hard at all, and it's not hard at all.
Can I chime in?
Yes, sir.
I've been in the computer field for over 35 years, and I read a bunch of books about how to self-publish on Amazon, and it sounded like a nightmare. But when I actually published last April, their software is some of the smoothest software I've ever used in 35 years. They've done a fantastic job. Putting the print book out is not difficult at all, and putting the ebook out is not difficult at all. I've heard some bad things about Amazon, but I found them to be most useful and most. You have total control. It's what you want, and I agree with Gary. If you want to publish on Amazon.
Jim, seeing as Matt is on, I think 7th or 8th book at this point. Jim, after finishing your first book, do you think like, oh man, I got to climb that mountain again? Would you do another book?
I wrote the first book because it was not like Gary. There was nothing to do during the pandemic, and like Gary, I didn't keep a record. These thoughts just sort of poured out of my mind, and I can honestly say that after I finished the last book, nothing's poured out of my mind. If I sat down and things from basic training or OCS started coming back, I'd write the book, but they're not there. And I when I read back through the manuscripts, I don't even remember writing some of that stuff. My wife says I sort of went away for a year. And so maybe it was my PTSD resolving this, but I don't have anything else to say. I couldn't write a fictional book with a plot and character development and pacing and all that. This is just a sequence of what happened. And I agree with Gary. You've got to write your stories, even if you don't publish them. Even you just print them on a printer and put them in a binder. So when you're gone 2 generations and are going through the albums, they say, "My God, what is this?" Because the only thing I know about my dad's a 2-dimensional picture of him standing under B-17.
Yep.
That's all I know. And so my wife is a history buff, and she says, we know a lot about Omar Bradley, we know a lot about Patton, but what about Private Smith and Sergeant Jones? No one knows those stories. And as we die, which we're doing at an ever fast rate, our stories go away. And so you have to write them. You don't have to publish them, but you have to write them for the next leaf and the next leaf on the family tree.
Matt, I had a follow-up question about the conversations. You said you could take those scenarios and write conversation around them. To a civilian, I'm not a veteran. I've heard and have seen how military speak can at times get very boring and very drab and very technical. So how do you punch it up? How do you breathe some life into it and character into it to make it an interesting read?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because right now I'm going through trying to decipher maybe the language. On our 3rd book, Lamsan 719, I'm right now writing a screenplay for that book. We have got an awesome producer. She's done 19 episodes of NCIS New Orleans, and she has come aboard as a producer for me. I've got an assistant screenwriter, because the software to write a screenplay is something called Final Draft, and it's Greek to me right now, so I'm struggling with that. But as I'm writing this, I'm looking at, as you said, the military speak. Well, my assistant screenwriter, he's 23 years old. He doesn't have military speak in his vocabulary. So I'm trying, he'll read something, he goes, "What is a Cobra jockey?" And so I got to explain to him what a Cobra jockey is. or what a slick is. And he says, well, we've got to put this in language that somebody watching the big screen is going to be able to understand. So that is the struggle I've got with a lot of the military jargon of deciphering it. And like I'll say something about the talk. Well, he points out a civilian's not going to know what a talk is. So we're going to have to say Tactical Operations Center, or what an ARVN is. We're going to have to say somewhere Army of Republic of Vietnam, or an NVA. So those kinds of things. I've got this kid sitting here, and he's ciphering that out for me. Hopefully we'll get this thing done, and it'll be finished before I start pushing daisies up. We've made a commitment that most of any profit we make is going to go to veterans organizations, the scholarship fund at Quad A, the American Huey Foundation, who's just building a museum now up in Ohio. I would like to get the gal you had on last night and see if we can work something out that we can get some proceeds to her as well. But it's not about making money. It's about telling the story to as many people as we can.
And really, I mean, I recently, running the podcast Scuttlebutt for the VBC, we've done some movie reviews of post 9/11 war movies, and we recently did Kilo 2 Bravo, which is a British war film about a group in Afghanistan that kind of gets trapped in a minefield. Now, the first, I was telling people about this first half hour of the film, make sure you have your closed captioning on, because they didn't shy away from the military speak. In fact, you add in the British slang for all of these things, and you're watching, trying to decipher it. But that was kind of part of the fun too. So I would say, like, some of those things, as a civilian, I like seeing all of that. But, you know, you can get into some very technical things, like you watch Generation Kill on HBO, and some of that stuff really comes out, and you have to sort of decipher it a bit as a civilian. But I think that kind of helps us as civilians understand the military a bit more. That's just my take and personal opinion. But Ron Giunta, you had some chats in here in the chat. You also have your hand up if you'd like to chime in.
Yeah, how you doing? Can you hear me okay, Sean?
Yeah, we can hear you, Ron.
Great. I cannot get my camera to work. It's just, I don't know. I guess I'm being technically challenged today. Anyways, Matt, my name is Ron Giunta. I just retired from the Veterans Benefit Administration 3 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
And thank you. I'm retired for the third time.
At some point, we're not going to congratulate you anymore, Ron. It's
well, I retired from the Air Force, 32 years in 2012, and then I retired from banking, and then I came to work for the Veterans Benefit Administration, helping veterans with their claims, doing outreach events. And I decided maybe now is the time to retire and start enjoying life. But anyways, Matt, a couple of comments. Number one, you are spot on about veterans who retire, and there's nothing else going on, and now the PTSD sets in. My comment is, it's never ever too late for a veteran to file a claim for PTSD, no matter how old you are. My gosh, I helped a veteran who was 92 years old, a World War II veteran, and he filed his very first claim at age 92 for PTSD. But what you explained about your experiences are so true about so many veterans, that whenever we retire and there's not a lot going on to occupy our minds, things begin to come back to us, and we start, reminiscing about our life. Number two, you would have made a really good action officer in the Pentagon. I'm telling you right now, I spent 7 years in the Pentagon myself. Okay. And you would have been awesome in there because of your experience, your knowledge, and everything else that you have, because you would have really brought something. You would have brought a sense of reality to people who are trying to make decisions for the benefit of our services. So I'm just telling, I'm a retired colonel too, but I spent 7 years in the Pentagon, and it does take a knack. Like you said, it takes a special knack to put up with what goes on at the Pentagon. But I really enjoyed hearing you today, and I just wanted to say thank you for your service, and thank you for all you do to help our veterans.
Thank you, Ron. Same to you.
Madam,
my condolences, Ron, that you were in the Pentagon.
Well, I don't know. I worked for the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Manpower Reserve Affairs, and it wasn't too bad because he was an Army veteran too. So it worked. It was a good time. You just knew when to keep your head down.
You take the good, you take the bad. Matt, I want to loop back as we're sort of finishing up our time here, and I want to loop back and you started your career as a pilot. At what point did you stop flying, and do you miss it?
Good question. In the early days, you'd be an infantry officer, and you might be an assault helicopter pilot, or if you were an armor officer, you may have gone into gunships. We didn't have an aviation branch up until 1985. In 1985, the Army formed the aviation branch, and they sent every pilot a little letter that said, okay, we got an aviation branch now. You can either be an infantry officer or you can be an aviation officer, but no longer can you be both. Prior to 85, what I would do is I would get an assignment in an aviation unit, and then my next assignment, I would fight to get an assignment in the infantry. And every 3 years, I was bouncing back and forth between them. Like I went to Alaska on an aviation assignment. While I was in Alaska, they pulled me out of the aviation assignment and had me go take command of this airborne unit. So aviation to infantry, etc. I left Alaska. They sent me to Maryland to be the aviation advisor to the state of Maryland. In 85, you couldn't make those jumps anymore. So I decided since my command time, I commanded 2 companies in the infantry. My operations officer's time was in the infantry. I decided to go ahead and go infantry and gave up flying in 85. Fortuitous, about 3 months later, I had an accident and I lost partial vision in my left eye. So if I'd gone the aviation side, I'd been permanently grounded. So it just worked out for me to be on the infantry side.
And do you miss it? Miss flying?
Yeah, I do. We got a little airport not too far from us, and I'll wander down there every once in a while and smell gasoline and sniff airplanes. It's kind of embarrassing, but that's okay.
And you had you had mentioned before that your dad said that you had your pilot's license before you even enlisted. What did you prefer flying? Did you prefer flying the helicopters or the planes?
Helicopters, 100%.
Yeah. Well, it's in one of your bios, you said something about, in one of the descriptions, I think, of your books, it says that it's like riding a bull, right?
A helicopter?
I think, yeah.
I forgot. Well, I think somebody said something about that. I can't remember.
Maybe I saw it in a review, but a helicopter pilot saying like trying to tame this thing is like, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it is. A helicopter, and I think Harry Reasoner said it best. Fixed-wing pilots are always happy-go-lucky because they're flying a machine that wants to fly. Helicopter pilots are always inward-looking, very depressed, a lot of anxiety because they're flying a machine that doesn't want to fly and only flies because the interaction of man operating 4 different controls at one time. And the thing about a helicopter is if you move one control, you got to move the others as well. And so, and I did talk about that in the book. In fact, my dad, in the chapter with my dad in there, he asked us why the fixed wing guys are always so happy and you guys are always full of anxiety and depression. So I wrote that in there and explained it. But Harry Reasoner said it very well when he did his thing about helicopter pilots versus fixed wing. I got my fixed wing pilot's license when I was 16. I had a summer job working at a small airport refueling airplanes. And instead of getting paid in cash, I got paid in flying lessons. So that's how I wound up getting my pilot's license. But I really like the helicopter much more. Fixed wings, the stall in fixed wings used to scare the living daylights out of me. I never was comfortable with that. But the helicopter, I used to love to shoot auto rotations, chop that throttle and put it down.
Larry Guggens, who's a fixed wing pilot, fixed wing pilot. Larry, you probably, I was going to say, Jim, we'll get to you in just a sec. Larry, did you have a thought on the fixed wing versus helicopter?
Oh, I definitely do. I got 2 questions. First, when were you in Alaska? What years?
I got to Alaska in 77. September of 77, I got to Fairbanks, and I was the ops officer for E Troop Cav. and then left in 78 and went down, took command of Charlie Airborne 1st and 60th.
I was at Eielson at the same time.
Ah,
And I was at Fort Wainwright, and I was over there and became friends with many of the pilots of Fort Wainwright. And I'll share then a story that you just mentioned about I'm a fixed wing guy. I flew fixed wing, fighters for the most part for 21 years. I can agree with you on one thing. This pilot that I was flying with, I'd take him in an O2, would fly up in the mountains. I'd go fly with him on the Loach, I guess is what it's called. That was, forward air controller for the Cobras at the time, if I recall correctly. And he tried to get me to land a Loach.
well, you were flying in our outfit then, because we're the ones that had them.
Yeah, is it probably? Yeah, maybe I know you. I don't know, but I was over there at Fort Wainwright quite a bit. Anyway, I tried to land it a couple of times, and he was laughing his butt off. He was an instructor, I guess, laughing his butt off at me trying to do it. The airspeed might not be accurate, but above about 40 knots, it flies like an airplane, or some airspeed. But then when you start getting down slower and you get all of those controls and try to run all of those controls, I could not control the yaw. I could not control the yaw. Finally, at the end, I think I got about 5 feet above the ground, and he just said, "Whatever you do," and I landed like 3 times, And that's it. That's it. I will never make fun of a helicopter pilot. But I was there at the same time, and I used to spend a lot of time down at Fort Wainwright, back and forth to Eielson. So, maybe I met you there. Maybe I was there.
Our unit was the only one at Wainwright that had the Loaches.
Yeah,
and they were the scouts for the Cobras.
Right. Yeah.
So, if you were there, you were flying in the outfit when I was there then.
And I did, and I'll let it go. I know it's getting late, Sean, but I did get a ride in a Cobra, and I thought low level was low level until I flew in a Cobra and a Loach. I didn't know that the trees actually, I think that we were below the trees and below the roots of the trees, I think. They're going over your head and doing this kind of stuff and all that. I said, this is crazy. I totally respect what you did. It's scary, right? Is that you? I totally respect what you did in your books. Thank you very much, Sean. I'll let it go. But you're right. A Cobra does not want to fly. I mean, a helicopter does not want to fly. Yeah. Thank you very much for your insights. Yeah.
Thank you, Larry. And Jim, you want to bring us home?
Well, I just wanted to ask one question. That is, in your first book, you describe a very radical maneuver to get down into a hot LZ that scared the pants off your door gunners and your occasional guest you had flying in the other seat. Did that technique ever become taught at flight school as a standard tactic for trying to get in and out of a hot LZ?
No, it never got.
Does anyone do it today?
No. In fact, today I don't even think they allow the students to do a touchdown on the auto rotations.
What was the technique?
I would bring the aircraft in. I had to be sure I had at least 1,000 feet, but fly over the LZ, chop the throttle, zero out the airspeed, and just about when the airspeed went through 10 knots, kick full left pedal and put the aircraft in the helicopter in a flat spin for 180, bring it right on around 360 degrees. And then shove the nose over so you're heading straight for the ground to build up the rotor speed, and then flare it out at 75 feet and set it down. Used to scare the living daylights out of people, but it worked. I used it on 2 occasions, and I had 51 caliber machine gun shooting at me, and they stopped shooting because they thought they hit me. And when they saw that aircraft zero out the airspeed and start to go in that pedal turn, they stopped shooting because they thought they'd hit me, and they hadn't. And it allowed me to get into the LZ.
No, thanks. I'll go fly in a fixed wing any day. Matt, Gary, absolute honor, pleasure to have you on this morning. Really appreciate your time, your service. Welcome home. Thank you for coming on, and we do hope that you join us again on VBC. Talk about the next series of books. The Easter Offensive. Would love to have you back.
Well, I want to get all the information on when you guys meet, and I intend to sit in and ask the questions next time as opposed to give the answers.
Wonderful. This is I think our last coffee hour Wednesday morning until we get back into the really cold months again later in the year. But we are on every Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern time. with military stories, military topics, authors, historians, every Monday night, 7 p.m., this same Zoom channel.
I will get in touch with Todd and make sure I've got that where I can start joining you. Really
Wonderful.
appreciate it. Really enjoyed being with y'all.
Great. Thank you. We'll send you off a magazine and, hope to talk to you guys all again soon. Have a great day, everybody.